Welcome to the International Leadership Institute's podcast on leadership. Today we are joined by Dr. Dan Slagle, and we are going to be unpacking missions and how to keep that in the forefront of your congregation and senior pastor. Dan, thank you for being here with us.
Sure.
I think a lot of you that watch us know him pretty well. If not, go check out some of the podcasts that he's been on. He is a man of great wisdom. And so today we're going to tap into your history and your wisdom and a way to encourage those of you that are leading missions at your church. So Dan, how long did you lead missions for those people that this might be their first podcast?
Right. I served as the missions pastor at Faith Bridge Church, which is in Spring, Texas, just outside of Houston, for 16 years.
Wow. That's a long time.
From 2006 to 2022.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And you grew that ministry. You were the very first mission pastor there. Is that correct?
There was one predecessor to me. They lasted less than a year.
Okay.
And then I stepped into the role 4 years after they departed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you keep missions at the forefront of the vision and mission for the church?
Well, I'll start with this broad answer.
Mm-hmm.
It depends.
Mm.
It depends on your setting. It depends on the disposition of both the senior pastor, the church culture. All of those things have to be taken into consideration before you begin to establish a missions mindset or a missions ministry. By and large, this is certainly not true of every church, but by and large, most churches in the United States are focused on what's happening at home, their own situation.
Right.
Missions, particularly overseas missions, is not a front burner issue. And, to a degree, that is understandable. It takes a lot of work to keep a local church alive and running well and healthy. And as a senior pastor pointed out to me one time, a local church is a mission.
Right.
So there is some legitimacy to keeping the home fires burning.
Right.
But that certainly should not preclude an involvement with and a prioritization of international missions, local missions, any work that's happening outside the walls of the church.
Right.
So to make that sort of ministry a priority, as I said, one, first of all, has to take stock of what the current situation is, and then begin to develop your strategy based on the challenges that you are facing. In my particular situation, the challenge wasn't all that difficult. I was fortunate to have a senior pastor who was a missions-minded individual, and Faith Bridge was an outwardly focused church. There was just not a formal representation of that with its own ministry, and certainly not a missions pastor. When I began to sense the Lord tapping my shoulder to fill this role, I knew that my number one job was going to be to demonstrate to the senior pastor how missions would add value to the local church.
Wow.
That it would not become an albatross around his neck, that it wouldn't in any way detract from the good work that was already going on, but it would actually enhance it, and that it would help the church grow both spiritually, numerically, also financially. And so in our first conversation about it, he was somewhat reluctant, not because he was opposed to missions, but because I already had a role there that I was doing well and he was happy with,
Mm.
and he didn't know if I should make that jump. And so the two measures that he gave me to meet in order to justify developing a missions ministry and me becoming a missions pastor were participation, actual involvement in serving, and giving.
Mm.
Would the congregation be motivated to give to this opportunity?
Mm.
And so that was where I focused my efforts, but that was my situation.
Mm-hmm.
I think, as I've said now a couple of times, it's imperative you really study and understand your current culture
Right.
before you develop your strategy.
Right. What advice would you give to someone on staff who also feels that pull towards missions, but maybe their senior pastor is neglecting it
Mhm.
for various reasons? But
Right.
how do you become an encourager and lead up, for example, in regard to missions for a church?
Right. Let me begin by, first of all, suggesting what you should not do. You should not attempt to argue your senior pastor into accepting your
Good
proposition.
advice. Yeah.
You know, and by argue, I don't only mean being belligerent, but just taking a purely logical approach isn't going to work.
Mm-hmm.
You can talk to your blue in the face, but he or she is still facing the same realities that they already have.
Right.
You have to bring something to the table that will demonstrate this will add value to the church. This is going to be good for us, and have an initial plan anyway to back that up.
Right.
The worst thing you could do is lay out this marvelous rationale for it, showing how it adds value, and then the senior pastor says, "Well, okay, how are you going to do it?"
Right.
Haven't figured that out yet. No, you really want to have thought this thing
Mm-hmm.
through.
Mm-hmm.
My experience was discovering the importance of grassroots.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't just stand up in front of the congregation and say, "We're going to have missions ministry, y'all come."
Mm-hmm.
Because when a broad announcement is made like that, there's a psychological principle. What's everybody's business is nobody's business.
Mm.
If you just make this broad appeal, most people are going to think, "Oh, well, that doesn't apply to me," but
Right.
the person next to me probably will.
Right.
I had to go and find the individuals in the congregation who I suspected were passionate about missions, have that confirmed, and then begin to work with those individuals to create a movement from within, not me stepping in and trying to persuade people
Yeah.
from the outside.
Wow.
That was the ticket
Mm-hmm.
to enlist the support and the leadership of the laity in making this happen.
Yeah.
Because even though I was a longtime colleague of my senior pastor, we'd known each other for over 25 years, he was a lot more likely to listen to a group of laity who are passionate about something. And by group, I mean 15, 20 folks who are passionate about something,
Right.
than just me.
Yeah.
That's going to get his attention. It did get his attention.
That is really great advice. I know some of the church partners we have here at ILI are part of our community of donors and partners because of people at the church.
Right.
Who were pushing it, who were excited about it, who wanted to travel with us and do History Makers, training events. And so they really encourage the senior pastors. We've had senior pastors call us and say, "I've got so many people talking about you to me. What is it that you guys do?"
There you go.
And so that's nice and it's great. It's exactly what you're saying though. When your church gets excited about something, or whenever the people in your congregation get excited about something, it's easier for the senior pastor to grab onto that for them and champion what they're doing. It doesn't seem like it's just another program or another thing that
Exactly.
is just a part of the church.
Yeah.
So that's really timely and great advice.
I was given a month to demonstrate that Faith Bridge needed a missions ministry, the month of October.
Oh, wow.
Which we are in now.
Yeah.
And I gathered together 12 individuals who I knew were passionate about missions and who I knew had leadership abilities. And we set 2 goals for ourselves based on our senior pastor's requirements. We were going to maximize congregational participation in any way we could. We wanted to create as many opportunities for people to serve as we could find. And we were going to challenge people to put their money where their mouth is.
Right.
To help people understand that the missional efforts of this church are worth your extra giving. And so we came up with a plan. We called it Taking It to the Streets, the Doobie Brothers song. As a matter of fact, we even sang that one Sunday in church. And every week throughout that month, we had a minimum of 15, maybe even 20 missional opportunities for people to participate in. And it culminated the last Sunday in October with a Faith Promise Sunday, where we challenge people to make a commitment, whether they had those extra dollars or not, but just to trust that God would provide.
Right.
And I'll never forget walking into Ken's office, my senior pastor, and he said, "Well, how did it go?" And I was able to tell him throughout the month of October, we had 1,500 Faith Bridgers participate in missional efforts, and over $300,000 were pledged that first Sunday.
Wow.
And he stuck out his hand and said, "Congratulations, you're my new missions pastor." The only reason that happened is because I involved lay leaders who had influence,
Right.
and who could think bigger thoughts than me, and who could expand our vision and involve other people. If it had just been me trying to convince Ken and then trying to convince the congregation, it would have flopped.
Yeah.
I guarantee it.
Yeah.
But because those people jumped in with both feet and worked hard and led well, now, almost 19 years later, missions ministry at Faith Bridge is bigger than it's ever been. I want to say the budget now, or the budget when I left there in 22 was $1.3 million.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's only grown since then.
That's incredible.
So, yeah.
300,000 turned into 1.3 million.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. That's going to make some people eyes get big when they realize that, like you don't realize what you're not tapping into. You have so many reservations, but we talk about it so often. Acts 1:8 is a great mission strategy locally and globally. And so what kind of wisdom would you have? I don't know if you oversaw the local and global missions, so you may be able to talk about the friction with that from the same seat, or maybe there's another person you had to work with. I see a lot of churches have a local missions pastor and a global international mission partners pastor. And so oftentimes the church heavily focuses on that local mission piece,
right,
leaving the international missions to the side, which is, to the ends of the earth of the Acts 1:8 scripture. So how do you balance that? How do you add fuel to the international piece, which is harder to convince people to use their vacations, to go overseas? Sure. Why do we have to travel so far? We have people here that are hurting and in need. So maybe you can add some wisdom to some of that tension that those pastors feel.
Sure. So the first decision we made that helped with the problem you're speaking of was, from the get-go, we decided that the budget would be cut right down the middle, 50-50. Local would get X and international would get X. One would not be prioritized over the other.
Wow.
That helped
Yeah.
a lot
Absolutely.
to raise the awareness of the importance of international missions and opportunities to participate. We did a couple of things. I was given just about every October from there on to preach about it.
Mm-hmm.
And stories were the
Yeah.
key in my sermons.
Yeah.
Stories and video images and all of those things
Yeah.
that
You're also
speak to people.
You're also a great communicator. No
Well,
one
thank
likes
you.
teaching with you because you're like top of the line.
Well, thank you. You're very
Not
kind.
that we don't like, but we learn so much from you when we're at training events or watching your messages online. It's just incredible.
Thank you. You're very kind. I appreciate it. I took advantage of my preaching opportunities
Sure.
to raise that banner. Then we provided international opportunities that we called on-ramps.
Mm,
We didn't start out going to Africa
right.
or India. We started out going just down the road, so to speak, from Houston to Honduras.
Mm.
A 1 hour flight out
Sure.
of Houston, I
Right.
believe, not much more than that, maybe a couple hours. We partnered with a ministry there that was very effective, is still effective, Hope for Honduras, but didn't create culture shock for
Mhm.
the participants.
Right.
But it did touch their hearts.
Mm.
And they were able to see, oh, wow, poverty is real.
Mhm.
We get blind to it here in the
Right.
U.S.
We do.
And there are people suffering every single day
Mm.
in these situations. So Honduras, El Salvador were our two sort of on-ramp trips where
Okay.
people could go and begin to discover, I can do this.
Mhm.
You know, I can leave my home, and
Yeah.
it's worth using a few days of vacation
Right.
even to do it. And then we built from there. We began to find partners in further countries, in Africa,
Mhm.
in South Asia, in Europe.
Mhm.
And the key there was partner identification. You want to be very picky, very
Right.
selective.
Right.
You want to choose partners that are in line with your vision, your
Mhm.
priorities, your
Right.
mission. Partners that will be a joy to work with
Mhm.
rather than creating headaches
Right.
for you. Partners that understand what you're up against
Mhm.
and who will work with you to lower those barriers and make it not easy. I don't want to use the word easy, but welcoming
Mhm.
for
Right.
individuals who aren't accustomed to international travel
Right.
to come and be involved. And most of all, to see I really am making a difference.
Mhm.
What I did here was impactful.
Right. God really did send them that far away
Absolutely.
for that time
He
to make
used
an
it.
impact.
Yeah.
Yep.
Those sorts of things we found to be very, very helpful.
Good. So, did you feel any tension between the congregation wanting to invest more locally than internationally, or were they?
You know, in my situation, I suppose I was very fortunate.
Mm-hmm.
Not once,
Yeah.
not one time did anyone say anything remotely to me like, well, we've got needs here. Why are you? That was
Yeah.
never an issue for
Yeah.
us because we demonstrated our efforts were being put forth equally on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Our local missions were fantastic. As a matter of fact, perhaps the highlight of our local mission efforts was the cultivation of our very own nonprofit ministry to a lower income neighborhood not far from where Faith Bridge is located.
Mm-hmm.
Bridging for Tomorrow. It works with families primarily in a multitude of ways, mentoring their children, English language skills, job training,
Right.
just a whole host of things that benefits and blesses that community. That ministry now has its own budget in approaching $1 million.
Wow.
Yeah, that isn't raised strictly from within FaithBridge.
Wow.
It grew to a point where it could begin to have its own fundraisers.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I think because we created equal opportunities
Mm-hmm.
on both sides that were equally impactful, equally meaningful, I just never had to deal with that tension between the two. Yeah.
That's great to consider. What are your standards? How are you starting each year, knowing where to go? So how do you know who to champion? So you have certain people that are really encouraged about missions. How do you really decide and differentiate between someone who's just excited and someone who can actually champion a trip and lead a trip for you? Because I know you didn't go on all the trips.
Right.
So how did you kind of handle that?
Well, initially, we looked for people who had already exhibited some leadership skills
Mhm.
in general.
Right.
And we required people to prove themselves.
Mhm.
Somebody comes to me and says, I want to lead a trip to Kenya. Well, how about we start with something local?
Mhm. Oh yeah.
Let's see how passionate are you about serving people right here?
Yes.
And if that individual demonstrated that, yeah, they could make it happen. They could lead, they could recruit, they could deploy, they could solve problems, they could create energy
Mhm.
around this, I'd be a lot more inclined the next time to say, okay, how about if we try this?
Mhm.
Giving people an opportunity to prove themselves, not only prove themselves as individuals, but to prove their ideas.
Right.
People would frequently come to me passionate about something they had bumped up against in Houston,
Mhm.
either another potential partner or a need. Come to me and say, Pastor Dan, we ought to do something about this. Well, how about we start with you? You've obviously got the passion.
Right.
Give it a go and let's see what happens.
Mhm.
Rarely would we give them seed money.
Mhm.
I would want to see, can you do something without resources?
Right.
If they demonstrated, oh yeah, I can make it happen, then seed money might be forthcoming to begin to develop that. And I would say most of our local partnerships were born that way. I didn't think them up. I didn't have to go out and find them.
Right.
FaithBridgers brought them to me.
Wow.
Because they were excited or passionate about human trafficking or poverty or what have you. Yeah.
Man, I really love that, because then you're championing what their passion is.
Absolutely.
If God's given them a vision, like say human trafficking, if God's given them a vision to meet a need there, they go and start meeting that need, and then you come alongside and financially resource them and spiritually resource them and send others who have the same need, same passion for that ministry.
Right.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
I'm glad y'all did that.
It was
fun. Earlier, I was thinking of a question and I forgot what it was, but it just came back to me. So you split the resources 50-50. And I know some people watching might think, wow, that's a lot to give internationally. Potentially, shouldn't you invest more in your own community? And I wanted to kind of unpack that somewhat, because statistically, the United States only gives a fraction of 1% internationally. And so that's actually really sad. If you think statistically we should give more to international missions to make up for it.
Yeah.
And so how did you rationale the 50 split? Any encouragement to someone who's watching that might be creating their new budget, or maybe they're feeling, oh, wow, we do like 75-25. How can we get to a 50% internationally?
Right. Well, I'm Wesleyan in my theology. And John Wesley used to say, the world is my parish. Not just this little corner of England, but he understood the whole world needs Jesus. And so my mindset going into it was that perspective.
Right.
That Faith Bridge was not called just to minister to Spring, Texas or Houston, but to the whole world,
Right.
because the whole world needs Jesus.
Absolutely.
I would expand the international mission ministry at Faith Bridge through involvement. You take someone on a life-changing mission trip, they're going to come back and talk about it. And the more successes we had overseas, the easier it was for people to buy into it and participate. As I said, I was fortunate enough to not have that tension between the two. But stories became my best friend. We never went on a mission trip that we didn't take a video camera.
Right.
Or at least a camera. And come back and be able, on any given Sunday, to be able to tell the story of this is what happened in this particular slum of India. Or this is what happened when we began to feed children in Honduras. Or this is what happened when we had an open-air evangelistic opportunity in Mozambique.
Right.
You know, just on and on. Never underestimate the power of story, and when you can aid that storytelling visually, all the better.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
You're right. Stories get our hearts. You know, the statistics get our minds, but to really draw someone in with their heart,
boom,
you need those stories.
Absolutely.
It's a both and, not either or.
That's right.
You know, it really
That's
is.
right.
So someone watching might be struggling with all the things that we've talked about. And you have a lot of wisdom and a lot of success in this area. How would you encourage them to continue being faithful? And I'll add this caveat. I feel so often, and I know, oftentimes when we start to feel that tension in ministry, we look for the exit door. It's not often that someone sticks it out through really difficult seasons, especially transition seasons, or you're being told no every single time the budget cycle comes around.
Right.
And so I want to encourage people watching that the exit door might not be the strategy. It might be enduring a season of difficulty and just continue being that squeaky wheel that eventually one day will get the attention. And so how would you encourage someone in that seat just to continue being faithful in what God is putting in their heart passionately for missions?
Right. Well, maintain your own passion for what God has placed on your heart by maintaining the health of your soul. You know, being faithful in prayer and in study of the scriptures and in, community, being involved in the life of the church, keeping your own heart healthy.
Right.
Because the quickest way to get discouraged is to neglect your own heart.
Absolutely.
So make that a priority. Bloom where you're planted. Don't start out suggesting that we take a team to India. Start right where you are.
Right.
And if where you are is a member of a 150-member church who has an annual budget of, let's say, $80,000, well, okay, great. There are needs right there in that community.
Absolutely. That
can be addressed and won't even require a single penny of the church's budget. Find the 1, 2, 3, however many God brings, like-minded people who will rally around and not only address the situation, but even provide resources to be able to do that. As you grow that grassroots movement, eventually it's going to get to a size where the pastor and the leadership of the church can't ignore it.
Right.
It's almost being demanded by the participation and the giving of the congregation.
Right.
So be faithful in tending your own soul. Be faithful in involving others and giving them a chance to exercise their leadership gifts. And let the results speak for themselves. Those will speak so much louder than any argument complaining, whining, begging
Yeah.
that you could do
Yeah.
on your
Absolutely.
own. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for being on today.
Sure.
It's been a great conversation. I hope those of you watching have found some encouragement in what we've been discussing. And I do want to address one thing. I realize at the end of this, we are talking a lot about mission pastors and local mission pastors. And I want to encourage those of you that, like Dan said, you may be attending a smaller church. You may not even have a missions pastor. Maybe you're on staff in a different role at the church. Maybe you're just a key influencer in your church. If you have a passion for missions, we want to encourage you with everything we've discussed. Don't let the title mission pastor throw you off from our conversation today.
Amen.
Because if you have that passion, it's for a reason. God has shown you a need, and He will show you the ways to meet that need, and He will back it up with the resources financially, but also with the people that will champion that with you. So I want to encourage you as you've watched today, keep championing missions however God puts in your way, and keep championing the people that He surrounds you with that will walk that path with you. If you've enjoyed the show today, if you enjoyed the conversation, then give us a like, share it, tell your friends. Thanks for joining us.